dog on earth. I am your host, Red Karan. I am not totally sure if this camera is going to make it to the end of this recording, but I'm going to record regardless. I think it will, but we shall see. If this episode is ruined, then you're just going to be watching a chopped up, fucked up episode. But anyway, man, yeah, like I said, this is episode 25 of Streams. The topic I wanted to cover today, I forget exactly how I phrased it when I came up with this idea, but we were in the studio talking. I don't even remember who it was. I think I was talking about this topic with a few different people. I think one of them was my man's Ro. Shout out to Ro, official Ro on Instagram, ROW. But we were talking about, I believe we were talking about how essentially music has gone to a place where people have confused fame over substance. We were talking about that because we were discussing like the phenomenon of all these new artists that are sort of like uber famous. You know, they've got millions of followers on Instagram and Twitter and wherever you go. You know, their videos might have 150 million views, 300 million views on their video. But then those same people will put on a show, a tour, and they'll try to do an arena tour or something, you know, maybe under that, because arenas are pretty much reserved for like Beyonce and acts of that caliber. But large venues is my point. And they can't fill the room. Versus an artist like me and my homeboy Antoine, we were talking about how these older artists now are putting on tours, albeit they're doing it together, like the Legends of Whatever tour, and it might be Busta Rhymes, blah, 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 a bunch of artists from the 90s, 2000s, and they'll go on tour, but they're filling the room, and their shows are typically giving better reviews than these newer artists. And the question is, why? Well, it's because those artists from the past were developed by a label, by management, by, you know, artist development was a thing back then. They were taught how to perform. They were taught how to interview. They were taught how to make music. They were taught how to carry their brand and how to be sort of inaccessible, how to have some sort of mystique to their character to make them a lot more appealing, how to leverage their value and all of that type of stuff, versus these artists now that are coming out of their bedrooms, gaining fame on whatever social platform they, you know, catch a following on, and then they're thrust out into the open and they have no idea what they're doing. You know, I believe that the way that you carry your artistry, it's like it encapsulates everything that comes along with it. I feel like if you don't respect the art of music, if you don't respect the art of music, it will show in the long run. Even if you have short-term victories. Prime example is the City Girls. Everybody wants to fuck them. A lot of women wants to be them. They're nice to look at. They're entertaining. But then they drop an album and it sells 8,000 copies. Why? Because no one cares what you're talking about. Your music does not really matter in the long run. Now, that's not to say just because they're, I don't really know how to say it. Just because they're not like J. Cole and they're not talking about depression or something important, that doesn't mean they can't sell. My belief is the reason that they don't sell is because they are not connecting with anyone in particular. There's a difference between being seen and being, eye candy, or being, I don't really know. It's like there's a difference between being eye candy, being seen, being salacious, having the world's attention, things like that. Only for, there's a difference between that and making a connection with people. Your entertainment for the short term. That's, that's one thing. And that's fine, bro. Only if you're of the understanding that you're entertainment for the short term. Lil Pump, Tekashi 6ix9ine. That stuff does not live forever. It is intriguing in its own way. It is interesting in its own way. But it's not substantial. It does not contain any substance. More than likely. More often than not. And I'm not a City Girls fan, so I've never listened and deep dived and listened to their entire albums. But I've heard enough to know that they don't really respect music. And I think that's what a lot of these acts, most of these acts are suffering from today, bro. I think 15, 20, 25 years ago, a lot of these artists, not only did they have something to talk about, but a lot of them valued music in general. If you listen to an Outkast album, right? Aquemini, AT-Alien, whatever it is, just the presentation alone shows you that they are fans of music, they respect the process of creating music, and they care about the final product of their music. They care about what they're giving you, what they're selling you. I've had plenty of hip-hop nerd conversations on this show. But just to go back, sort of to double back and to beat a dead horse, I think there was a gradual decline in not just quality. I don't want to talk about quality. I want to talk about the emotional, the spiritual investment that these artists have had in their music throughout time. It's been a decline since the 60s. Everything has become a little more commercialized, a little more easy bake oven over time. Even into the 80s from the 70s and the 60s. The 60s was full of soul. Temptations, all of those Motown acts, all of those super soulful acts that we all love and grew up listening to. Our parents love, blah, 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 right? Into the 80s, not to shit on the 80s, but just to be realistic about what happened in the 80s, the beat machine, the drum machine, the synthesizer was introduced in a much more commercialized way, right? Where soul singers stopped singing over live drums and live strings. It was much more cost effective. So you had Luther Vandross that would come out in the 80s, dominate throughout the 80s, but his songs were mostly electronic. So you had a large, a big giant boom of all of this soul music for 3 decades, from the 50s through the 70s. And then into the 80s, everything became, not everything, but a lot of, especially mainstream music, became electronic. They started to try a little less. Not to say that music didn't have its own quality, it wasn't good, because it was amazing. Luther Vandross's catalog is amazing. Prince's catalog is amazing, but Prince was one of those artists, one of those few artists, well, not few, he was one of those major mainstream big 3 artists, that fused electronic music with live music, because clearly they were playing the keys, the keytar, which was electronic, but you're physically playing it. You're not just programming it or whatever. But he's also playing guitar. He's got a band, they have basses, and it's real instrumentation mixed with electronic elements. Keep going. You get Thriller, you get all of these things. Off the Wall even. A lot of Off the Wall was electronic, digital. And then you go further and further, and I believe music in general, not hip-hop, not soul, not pop, music in general started to lose a little bit of that soul that made it special, to me at least. And it became a much more like assembly line, much more, produced, much more, how do I say that? It became much more mass produced, sort of like assembly line, electronic, press these few buttons and you got a whole production made in a fraction of the time that it used to take. Now I get it from a cost standpoint. Why an executive, why a producer, why an artist, why a studio will want to push for that easier process, because you're still getting a great product. It has a different sound, it's new, it's futuristic, but it doesn't contain the same amount of soul that, if you listen to Jackson 5, how that music sounded, if you listen to Curtis Mayfield, how that music sounded, if you listen to Willie Hutch, Teddy Pendergrass, all of those artists, if you listen to early Barry White, Diana Ross, those songs early in the 60s and 70s, the way that they sounded, the energy that comes through the speakers to this day. I have a couple hundred records behind me full of all that stuff, whether it was country, whatever, Blue-Eyed Soul. All of that stuff was made with live instruments, with real people in a room collaborating, no internet, and they made a song based on the way it felt to them. It wasn't necessarily about trying to hit these certain cues and trying to appease radio or trying to make the, some sort of formulaic hit where it satisfies the endorphins and the, it wasn't about that, at least to my knowledge. It was more about these artists, these producers, these studios making music that felt good to them. Now, there was a such thing as making hits, because if you watch the Hitsville documentary, they talked about their formula for making hits. But their formula for making hits still revolved around massive, massive amounts of soul that they poured into these songs. I'm sorry to be long-winded. That's my brand. If you're here, that's what I do, though. But to make these songs, to go forward in the creation of music, the soul started to leak out of it a little bit more and more, it seemed like every decade. Then you get hip-hop that took over pretty much in the 90s or late 80s, took over as the main genre. And being electronic was a lot more acceptable for rap, because historically, rappers don't rap over, 30-piece orchestras or grand pianos and stuff. We do now. It evolved into that, right? But historically, rap has always been digital. Even the fact that we sample records and then we put pretty much, programmed digital drums over them. Whether it was the 808, the 707, or whatever it might have been, we use drum machines, the ASR, the whatever it was, the MPCs. It was always digital, so the digital thing kind of like blended in with hip hop, and we kind of carried the digital sound and made it acceptable, and we blended it with sampled records of real, soulful, actual instrumentation. And it was a match made in heaven. So the thing that I noticed with rappers from the 80s and 90s was that they all grew up on, the old soul songs that they ended up sampling as artists. That was what they heard around their household. That was what they heard around their neighborhoods. They were raised and nurtured with the music that I'm mentioning, that I'm talking about. So when they started to make music, even though their genre was a degenerate genre, deviant, very scandalous music that they were making, they were made up of stuff that contained a lot of soul. You look at Ice Cube, you look at Nas, you look at Jay-Z. He talked about sampling records that his mother used to listen to in Marcy projects. All of these artists come from these eras where everything was much more substantial. Now, going forward, only naturally, the newer artists are born later. A lot of these new artists are born in the 2000s. A lot of these new artists are born in the late 90s. They grew up listening to rap. So they have a little bit of residual soul in them if they grew up listening to 50 Cent because of the samples that he would rap on, or if they grew up listening to whoever it might have been, early Jay-Z, if they grew up listening to Nas, to Stillmatic or whatever it might have been. They got glimpses of soul through those artists. But the things that they're really made up of, because of the degeneration of culture, music, in general, they're made up of a bunch of fluff and less substantial, pieces of culture that they took in. Everything became microwave. Instagram, Facebook, MTV stopped playing music. All of these things contributed to these artists growing up and really caring less about the process and being disconnected from what something being soulful felt like. They don't know what that feels like other than going back and retroactively listening to these things the way that I did. If I was born in 88, I'm much more closer in proximity to, like I rode around with my auntie in Highland Park, hearing Luther Vandross all day because that was her favorite artist. Very soulful. I used to listen to, I used to hear Diana Ross and Aretha Franklin all the time. I used to hear Michael Jackson all the time. I've held a Thriller record from the 80s in my hand as a child. But not to say that there isn't any soul today, but I think the world in general has degenerated, going downhill in the way that we produce things and the way that we care about quality and the process. Even our food and our clothing, the way that we dress, the way that we deal with each other, it's all seemed to get more laxed and much more mass produced. You know what I'm saying? I don't know anybody with a garden. Maybe one person. In my grandparents' time, everybody had gardens. Not everyone, literally, but you know what I'm trying to say. The quality of things have gone down. I say all of that to say that we have gotten to a place where these younger artists are essentially looking for quick bucks. They're looking for something that would be catchy, funny, outrageous, ridiculous, something that would be TikTok friendly, Instagram reel friendly, YouTube short friendly, that they can put out, gain the notoriety, gain the fame, build a name, and be able to eat. I do not blame you for that. You are trying to change your life through, I think, degrading means. I think disrespecting music. I don't like that because I'm a huge fan of music. All the way back to listening to Tchaikovsky or Beethoven or all of those things. I listened to that stuff. I studied it. I literally, I would have my mom. I would go to Target with my mom, and I would go to the CD section. And what I used to do, because I didn't know what I was looking for, I would find those albums that were like the best of the 1800s or the best of the best orchestra collection or whatever. And it would be a double disc album. It might be 10, 15, $20. Ask my mom to buy it. She would buy it for me. Now, I was sample hunting, but I would also listen to this music by itself because it was very interesting to me the way that these songs were constructed 200, 150, 100 years ago. It's amazing to me. The layering of these instruments and how they all marry into one song that sounds amazing. There's no mystery as to why we're still going to concerts, listening to Beethoven's music, and he's been dead for all this time. It's because they are masterpieces. That's what a masterpiece is. It's timeless. It's a timeless piece of art. It's something that has to be studied because it is so amazing. I can't recreate that. I mean, I don't want to say I can't do anything, but so far I haven't. You know what I'm saying? And I know because I am a musician, I've been producing for so long, I know how hard it is to compose that. It's not easy at all. There's nothing easy about it. Those are masterpieces. I don't think there's anybody who will dispute that. There's nobody who will argue with me on those, a lot of music throughout the last few centuries that we still hear to this day. Whether it's Gil Scott-Heron or, like I said, Beethoven or Bach or whatever it is, those are masterpieces. I think today, less artists are aiming to have masterpieces than there were back then. I could be wrong, but I know there are thousands and thousands of people on the mainstream level, I'm saying, that are making music. How many of those people are making masterpieces? Not everyone has to make a masterpiece, but who's aiming to make a masterpiece is my question. Because yes, it's cool to make a song for the moment that'll live for the next 6 months and never be heard again. Fine. But I know people are still talking about Tupac, and the nigga been dead for 26 years. Or 27 years. He's been dead for 27 years. Dead for 27 years. And we're still talking about him. A lot of the music that he made was made over 30 years ago. Over 3 decades ago, and I still got it on my iTunes. That is substantial. That is something that never dies. I'm still listening to Jay-Z's first album that came out in 1996. The same year Tupac died, I'm still listening to Jay-Z's first album. I'm still listening to Biggie's first and second album. 30 years ago. I can't name you too many albums from even the last decade alone that I'll want to hear 30 years from now. I don't know. We'll find out, hopefully. If I live to see that day, we'll find out. But as of right now, there aren't many, bro. There aren't many. I can name pretty much all of Kendrick's albums, all of J. Cole's albums, all of Nas's recent albums, stuff like that. And there's others that I would consider, but as opposed to the output, how much music is being made versus what I think is worthy of lasting and will stand the test of time, I think the ratio is ridiculous. They're talking about the sale of hip hop being down 40% this year. 40%. A lot of people are confused and they're having these discussions about why. Why is it down 40%? I'm not confused. Don't say I didn't tell you so. I've been talking about this for a long time. When I was younger, I used to talk about it in a much more opinionated, judgmental way. Today, I really don't say anything. Today, I create the music that I like. I'm involved in the creation of a lot of music that I like. I vote with my dollars and my plays on my iTunes and my, Apple Music rather, and my title when I add it. I vote by patronizing what I like. But don't say I didn't tell you so. And don't say we didn't tell you so. You're skipping the process. No one gives a fuck about what they're doing anymore. There's no wonder why these niggas they got 30 million followers on Instagram, but they can't fill the Fox Theater. I'm not confused about why they can't do that. It's because you're not making a connection from soul to soul with me or anyone else, not even your fans. You've got 30 million followers. Your album will come out. You will put a video on YouTube and you might get 120 million plays. But you are not making a connection from soul to soul. No one cares. No one cares. I think there's a lot of artists that are new that are making connections with their artists. I mean, with their fans, I'm sorry. I think in the beginning, I judged like the Migos, for instance. I judged them. I didn't like that shit because it was different from what I was used to. In my older age, I've loosened up a lot about the things that I tolerate as far as the music that I'll listen to. I love Migos. Them niggas is cold. They won me over time. And I had to tear down a bunch of walls in my mind about being judgmental about the new sound. The Migos are cold. They are talented. And they proved that to me by being consistent and actually caring about what they make. Now, a lot of it is ridiculous, but when you actually listen to them and who they are as artists, Offset is a talented person, bro. They talk about actual shit. Quavo is not the best rapper to me. Ironically, Offset was the best rapper in the group to me, but my point is, over time, I learned that they were good at what they do, and they actually have something to say, especially as they've gotten older. I think Lil Uzi, even though I don't like him at all, like I've heard songs that I like, but not a fan. But I think he makes a connection with his fans because he is himself, unapologetically. That's what makes the difference between a lot of the fluff artists, these little industry plants, and people like Lil Uzi Vert. He might be a fucking plant too, but if he is a plant, he infiltrated and he did what he was supposed to do. Uzi has a personality. Whether you like it or not, it is who he is, and he connects with his fans. A lot of street artists that are new today, they have a base because they come from the streets and they come from these neighborhoods that will forever carry them on. G Herbo from Chicago, Dirk from Chicago. Because he has a base, he has a home base. He'll never lose that. Even if he falls off, he still has Chicago, the same way Kanye has Chicago. You'll never lose that. because you actually have a background and a foundation that you build your name on, and they embrace you. They respect you. They like you. They patronize you when it counts. But for these artists, and I don't want to even start naming names, but for these artists that can't, I guess I could talk about the City Girls because I've already mentioned them. I'm not even totally sure where they're from. I think they're from Atlanta. They probably love them and wherever they're from. If they're from Atlanta, they probably love them there. But I've never seen, they don't come out and support them girls like that for real because they not talking about shit but being hoes. Who gives a fuck about that at the end of the day? It's a cool song. I've heard some shit from them that I like. I've heard them in features that I like. The nigga, was it Cause or whose song was that? Is when I first really was hip to them maybe 6 years ago. I'm like, damn, these hoes is hard. But it really goes no further than that for a lot of artists. You look at somebody like Kyle. I spy with my little eye. Okay, cool. It's a hit. It was on the radio for some months. Who gives a fuck, bro? Who are you? What is your personality? We don't know who you are, my nigga. There is no substance. We don't give a fuck. The same thing goes for, who was that just crossed my mind? There's a lot of artists that I think have great musical ability, but they fail to connect with a fan base, with a base, because that's what sustains you. The reason, it's surprising me to this day, how well J. Cole did, because I didn't suspect it when I saw him come out 13 years ago, 14 years ago. I didn't suspect him to do this well. But the reason that he's doing this well and continues to do this well is because his development was real. His connection to a fan base was real. He threw North Carolina on his back, Fayetteville on his back. And he walked with it. He ran with it. He has a base. He's good to his people. He's good to people in general. He seems to have great practices in the industry. The way that he deals with people. He does not charge people for features. He does great work. All of that matters. Your work ethic, your work quality, the way that you present yourself. The same way it does at your 9 to 5, it matters in the real world. When you're on that stage in Hollywood, if you keep running into studios, doing features for people, being an ass, being shiesty, shorting people, not doing the work that you promised you would do, you don't think the word will spread? I've heard some insider stories about Wale from people that I won't mention. I think the reason Wale has not been successful as his counterparts like Big Sean, J. Cole, Kendrick, Cudi, he came up with all of those niggas, Drake, ASAP. I think the reason he hasn't had as much success as some of those people I named is because he's a piece of shit, my nigga, from what I've heard. Now, I don't know this nigga personally, and I'm not trying to gossip. I'm just telling you, I'm lending to this conversation or this monologue that I'm having. I think the reason Wale has not made it as far as those people is because behind closed doors, he's not easy to work with. Niggas don't like that shit, my nigga. And now you got these artists running around, they have no etiquette, they don't know how to talk to people, no social skills, no people skills, you're not likable, you just a zombie that smoke weed and make music. And you be in rooms with people looking like this. What up? I done seen it a million times in this studio and in other studios. I try to introduce myself to people and them niggas don't have nothing to say because you so busy trying to be a gangster, you so busy trying to put on this facade, this face to protect yourself You're so dead inside that you don't know how to have a conversation or how to introduce yourself or show respect to another motherfucker. That's why all you niggas is still stuck in the crib, killing each other to perform at these strip clubs and fighting over scraps, because don't nobody want to fuck with you on a professional or a personal level. Nobody's being developed. These niggas don't have no manners, bro. Now you go and you get to the big stage. Don't nobody want to fuck with you. There's a lot of reasons I think hip hop is down 40% in sales, because a lot of these artists are pieces of shit. They're making things that they clearly did not try in making. No quality, no effort. You're just making music, putting it out for a cash grab. Versus you look at Griselda, not only are they street niggas, but they also are street niggas that have personalities and they know how to talk. There's no mystery as to why Westside Gunn is at a Vera Wang show or is at he's at Paris Fashion Week and everybody's loving him. This nigga comes from Buffalo who used to sell crack, allegedly. He's a drug dealer, but the reason that they love this nigga is because he's an older nigga. He comes from my era, where we were taught how to have etiquette and personality and people skills and social skills. How to look a nigga in his eye and say, "What's up? How you doing? Nice to meet you." It's okay to have a personality and also be a man and be something to be feared. I'm not confused why Westside Gunn can walk into any room and be himself and still be accepted. It's because he seems to be. I don't know this nigga, but he seems to be, through interviews and videos and his music, he seems to be a grown man with the ability to connect from one person to the next. The way that he presents his art, the work that they put into putting music out, the output, the quality. Even if they choose quantity over quality, because that was Griselda's, like, that was their shtick for a long time, was just putting shit out over and over and over again. It was still cold. They're still rapping over soulful shit. So they have a niche audience where they can go to Sony Hall in New York and fill it up, and it might be a few thousand people, like 2,000-3,000 people in there, versus some of these bigger artists who get 150 million views on a YouTube video. But Griselda, their fan base actually fucks with them. The weight is different. Your artists, these artists that I'm comparing the real artists to, they get a lot of attention, a lot of clicks, a lot of views, a lot of gossip, a lot of shade room posts, a lot of baller alert posts, shit like that. But the weight is different because no one gives a fuck. They're just in and out. It's fleeting. They just want to see you for the moment, laugh at you, discuss your moves. Like Blueface. You think Blueface can do a world tour? No. Blueface is salacious. Blueface is funny. Blueface is ridiculous. So we will watch his shows. We will click his posts. We will watch his YouTube videos. We will discuss them in private. But if Blueface dropped an album tomorrow, today is Thursday. It's Thursday morning. If he dropped an album tomorrow, who gives a fuck, bro? Because you have not connected with me. I don't give a fuck about what you do for real. We are all human beings on this earth looking for shit to fill the void. Entertainment to get us from the morning to the nighttime, to go to sleep, to wake up and do it all again. Because without entertainment, all this shit feels empty and lonely. So we will watch entertainment that has no substance because it just gets us from point A to point B. We are all guilty of that. But when it comes down to it, when we start making our favorite list, when it comes down to us spending our dollars, we only gonna do that on the shit that we really like. You ask a nigga to start spending money on the shit that they fuck with, if every time you played an album on Apple Music, it cost something, like iTunes used to, you would be much more selective about the shit that you click. If Instagram charged you for every post that you watched, you only gonna watch the shit that really matters to you versus doom scrolling and just looking at anything. You only gonna watch, I'm like, all right, well, if they was like for every follower, every account that you follow, we're gonna charge you $1, right? For every account that you follow, we're gonna charge you $1. Y'all will go unfollow so much of that bullshit so fast because it does not connect with your soul. It does not mean anything to you. All that you would have left is a bunch of shit that really matters to you. Things that help you in your career. Artists that feed your soul. Artists that speak to your experience. Artists that get you through your day. Artists that talk about raising children because you are a parent. I would have Kendrick on my shit. I would have Cole on my shit. I would have Benny on my shit. I would have all of Griselda on my shit. I would have Bodie on my shit because these niggas are talking about real life experiences from real places that they actually come from that actually matters to the people that it connects to versus an artist who's just saying some dumb shit and making noises on a beat because it satisfies, you know, your endorphins for the moment, that it satisfies, you know, it produces serotonin or something, whatever the scientific biological response is to hearing things that, fleeting things. I'm done, bro. You get the fucking point. This is Streams episode 25, bro. Appreciate you for tapping in. I'm sorry about the mistake with the audio. We out here, though. We rocking this motherfucker. Still got audio from the camera, so we good, but I make mistakes sometimes, too, you know what I'm saying? Hit that like. Hit that subscribe, for sure. Share this motherfucker. Leave a comment. I don't give a fuck what you say. Say anything. Leave a 100 emoji. Whatever the fuck you want to leave. Just get my engagement up so I can get this motherfucking ball rolling the way it's supposed to be rolling, man. I appreciate everybody that's here listening to this shit, tapped into my channel. It is not going unnoticed, and I definitely appreciate all of you. Holla at me next week.